And this is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world options trading program. And what we're going to do is really quickly an impromptu laws of game session. And what I'm going to try to do is really empower you some information that can help you become more powerful in the world if you kind of understand how to execute it. What I really want to ask you to do, really want to encourage you to do is this information that I'm giving to you as far as procedurally and from a perspective standpoint may be totally new to you. Nobody has maybe never explained things to you in this particular perspective. What I want to ask you to do is maybe watch this video 2 or 3 times. I'm not going to be talking for 45 minutes. You all know that's not really what I get into. Because what it allow you to do, maybe if you hear this 2 or 3 times and then maybe let the information sit on you and then maybe come back and respond. And I'm not saying that what you have to do is I'm saying that may be best for you, because there's often times where I will post stuff on social and I will get the response back from a person and I kind of question, do they really even understand what I posted? And I understand people's understanding and their personal reality may be different from mine. But it's similar to why I tell somebody, hey, I think Michael Jordan is the best basketball player to ever play for the Bulls. And a person will respond back with, well, I think Dan Marino's better. And my question is, well, where did you get Dan Marino in that conversation? And a lot of times it's because, and I've done this myself, is that we will respond to something without really understanding it first. So what I really want to encourage you to do is that what I'm going to talk about in this particular video, and maybe the first time you've heard somebody present these type of procedures to you, present this particular perspective to you. And so as a result, you may not truly understand it from a comprehensive standpoint. So what I want to ask you is just be patient with it. Maybe listen to this particular video 2 or 3 times, maybe let it sit on you. And sometimes when I'm listening to like a piece of creative content, I sometimes have to let it sit on me for a minute. You know, when I first bought Philadelphia Half-Life, I didn't like it when I first bought it. I kept listening to it, and then one day it just hit me, and I realized, man, this is one of the best albums I've ever heard in my life. But it took a minute for it to hit me because it was coming from that particular level sonically where my brain couldn't really adjust to it at that moment, right? And I'm not saying that my content is on that level, because it's not. But what I want you to understand is a lot of times when somebody presents something to us that is new to us, our response to it is kind of pre-programmed because we don't necessarily always know how to respond to it. Okay, so let's get into it. What we're going to talk about is exposing the gatekeepers and how you can eliminate them. And when I say eliminate them, I don't mean physically. I don't mean committing violence. Something that we talk about on this channel a lot is how do you build influence over time? How do you build power over time? And then how do you deal with people on a professional level, right? Don't mean that you go and you wish them ill will health wise. How do you deal with them from a professional capacity, right? And that's kind of what we're going to go into in this particular topic. And I didn't come up with this whole process myself. This particular concept from an overall standpoint was introduced to me by a guy from Bodyhood. I don't know if you want me to say his name, so I ain't gonna put his name on the mic like that. But it's from a particular organization called Bodyhood. They got a YouTube, they got an Instagram, and they create really, really good content. And when he first explained it to me, I did what a lot of us do. And that's why I'm telling you not to do it. I kind of bucked on it because it was brand new concept to me. I never had anybody tell me this type of stuff, that this was even possible to me. And then over time, I kind of finally started to understand what he was talking about, because he was giving me a particular perspective of the game that was totally new to me. I'm sorry. So this is something that is very much feasible, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But we talk about building power and building influence. You build it over time. The reason why you want power when you don't need it is so when you need it, you can utilize it. Most of us have been taught to never concentrate on building power. Then when we need it, we're frantic. And then we do these things like we flame people on social media. We go out and we riot. We do self-destructive stuff out of frustration because we've never been taught one of the things that we need to be consumed with is building power over time and putting ourselves in a position where we have a provision and a reserve of power. So then therefore we need to use it. It's on deck. Like I tell you, I'd rather have a gun and not need it than need it and don't have it. May never use it, but I'd rather have it be on deck and never need it than have to go to it and can't find it. And you run around with a chicken with your head cut off. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So you got to look at power the same way. You got to look at influence the same way. It's better to not have it, right? It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So here's a little prelude to what we're talking about. So we saw this pretty much this past week. Guy came out of the NBA, played for a few years, named Kwame Brown. I remember when he got drafted because he was supposed to go to Florida, from my understanding, supposed to play for Billy Donovan. Really, really good coach. And I think maybe they got some information that he was potentially going to be a number 1 pick or the top 5 pick, and they went to the draft because he was working out for the draft, from my understanding, in Gainesville. Even though he decided not to go to the school, Donovan told him, hey, you can still work out here and make sure you get ready for the draft camp, right? So I knew who Kwame Brown was years ago because he was supposed to go to Florida, from our understanding, right? So when this little story came out, I was familiar with him, and I know he had played ball for a very, very long time. And the thing about me is that I don't believe that because he was a number 1 pick and he wasn't LeBron James, because there's only going to be one LeBron James, he was a bust or he was a disappointment, because I don't believe that he was really supposed to be the number 1 pick. And he kind of explained that in his story, that they wanted to trade him for Elton Brand, but Poland, who's the owner of the team, he X'd the trade out. So now you have a player who you never wanted in the first place. You were just trying to utilize him as trade bait. So now you got a problem. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you know what? He wasn't deserving of the number 1 pick, but if he was only getting drafted number 1 as the byproduct of a trade, then he never should have been. It wasn't like they drafted him number 1 because they thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. There's 3 guys that I think, and I'm not trying to get this into a sports discussion, but there's 3 guys I think should have been drafted without ever going to college. That's LeBron, that's Chris Webber, and that's Shaquille O'Neal. Everybody else to me needed college, right? So he also, to me, fits into that same category. He probably needed to go to school. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to go to school if you can go and make money with your career, but I think he needed some of that development. So he played ball. They've been talking about this guy forever, right? He's been the butt of a lot of jokes. They've always tried to connect failure as a basketball player to this guy, and he's 100% correct with that. So there was a scenario where he pushed back against an incident in which he felt like, you're continuing to try to kick dirt on my name as the butt of this joke and as an example of basketball or NBA basketball failure. And what was interesting is that the people that he pushed back on, they initially pushed back on him, and they were very disrespectful in the way in which they did it. And the reason why they did that is because, 1, they didn't respect him, right? They did not respect him, and they had never respected him. And 2, these guys felt protected, and we're going to kind of explain why they felt protected. Then they did what they did. And then another guy who's a radio host and also has an executive position inside a corporate structure, he came out to protect those 2 guys that had initially criticized Kwame Brown. Now, we want to ask ourselves, well, why did he do that? Well, one of the reasons why he do that is because he's trying to protect his investment. He's invested in these guys, and we're going to kind of show you this. So it's not a rumor. It's not innuendo. I'm going to actually show you how this is broke down, because one thing about me, where I'm from, we're about structure. And I understand that a lot of other groups are about structure, but a lot of us are not about structure. We're very about being disorganized and being chaotic, and we embrace that. So we got to understand, what do these people fit into a structure? Because as a result of that structure, this particular person, right, we'll just call him CTG, felt like he needed to defend these people, because one thing we understand, a smart businessman is going to always defend his investment. And also, they were part of his particular structure, and we're going to show you the structure. And then what Kwame came back and did was say, well, you know what? I don't appreciate you criticizing me in a way in which you did it, because what CTG to me tried to do is he tried to embarrass the guy by bringing up something old. So now let's bring up something old on you, CTG, which is the fact that you had to plead to delinquency of a minor because of an allegation that you had been involved in some type of sexual impropriety. You had been alleged to have been involved with some type of sexual impropriety back in the day in which you were 22 years old. And the person that accused you of it, in which you were alleged to have been involved with, right, was 15 years old. I don't know about the laws in the state of South Carolina, but I think that was, maybe like a felony case, right? So Kwame put that on the table. As a result, this scenario started to spiral out of control, right? Then you want to ask yourself, well, how come CTG just didn't stay out of it? Because a smart businessman normally will always protect his investment. And he understands that these 2 players, which was Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, were part of his structure. So he was trying to defend a structure that he is in an effort to build out and to show to another structure that it is worth investment. right? And we're going to kind of explain that. Then what we're also going to do is show you how you can build power to protect yourself from what these people are doing, because that's what we don't talk about, right? We don't talk about this. We talk about making money, and nothing wrong with making money, nothing wrong with having money. But, you know, a lot of people got money but have no power, so they get attacked. A lot of people got money but they by themselves, so they get attacked, and they have no defense, right? Now, the difference between Mr. Brown and a lot of other people was the fact that he's independently well off financially. He doesn't need money from a particular organization. He doesn't need money from certain relationships. So they weren't able to attack him the way they normally would attack a lot of people. A lot of ex-basketball players looking for TV jobs, so they got to watch what they say. They got to watch what they do. A lot of ex-basketball players have TV jobs, so they got to watch what they say, watch what they do. He don't have that issue. So he was able to go on social media and say what he wanted to say and essentially expose these people and expose these gatekeepers. And there was really nothing they could do about it, because what could they do? They could take off his YouTube, but he's still going to be all right. He doesn't live off YouTube ad revenue. So he doesn't need the platform to support himself. Many people that are really big on social media, and it's not a negative, they need the social media platform to continue to support their lifestyle. So you can leverage that to govern their behavior. You can't do that with this guy. So they was in a bad spot. So then what they did, they took the surrender method, which is part of, if you ever read the 48 Laws of Power, I think it's law number 2. It's a surrender method, where when you realize that you can't win, you just surrender with the hope that that can eliminate the conflict. Because you can get into a position with somebody where you underestimate their ability to engage in a conflict. And then once you get into it with them, you realize you cannot win. So then as a tactic, what you do is you just surrender with the hope that that conflict can be over, and then you can move past it, because you realize that I'm engaged in a conflict with a person. I can't beat them. One of the things that you never do as a smart tactician is you never go to war with somebody that you don't know you can win before you go to war. Right? You're supposed to know you can win before you go to war. You don't go to war thinking. You got to know you can win before you go to war with somebody. Right? That's the first thing. So that's how that rolled out. What we're going to talk about and take it from a little bit of a different perspective is I'm going to kind of show you the structure, because many of us are upset about a lot of things, and we've not been taught to look at this a certain way and how we can build power to be effective about getting what we want in this world. But the first thing is we got to kind of understand the structure. So let me show you some West Orlando stuff. This is what we was taught how to do coming up. And this is something that really we learn from law enforcement, where if we're investigating somebody, if they're investigating somebody, the one thing they want to learn is not just who this person is, but who are they attached to, right? Who's everybody they attached to, then who are those people? So if I say I'm looking at person XYZ, who is XYZ attached to, and then who are they? Who are they attached to, then who are they? Who are they in this person's life, and then who are they in the larger thing? So am I looking at somebody that's at the top of an organization? Am I looking at somebody that's in the middle? Am I looking at somebody that's at the bottom? I don't believe in just using this term where he has handlers. My question is, who are the handlers? I need to know who the people are. But I come out of a different structure where we do these type of things. Now, I'm going to give you a disclaimer. I don't believe in doxing people. I don't believe in looking up a woman's address to figure out where she lives. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in putting somebody's address on the internet that has children in their house. We don't do none of that. Right? But what we do is when we have a professional issue with somebody on a professional level, we are trying to figure out what is their professional structure. How are they embedded in this professional structure? Who are they answering to? Who are they reporting to? Who are they delegating to? Where do they fit in this whole scheme? Right? So we don't dox people and try to get their address and stuff like that. We don't do none of that stuff. That's weirdo stuff to me. Right? Trying to find somebody's high school pictures from 30 years ago. We don't do none of that stuff. We're looking at this from a professional standpoint. Right? How can we affect these people professionally? Because we don't like how they're acting as a professional. So let's get into it. So I want you to understand something. This is the top of the food chain for this scenario. It's called iHeartMedia. Right? So I want you to remember this name, iHeartMedia. So first, let's go to this. iHeartMedia essentially is what I would call them a communications company, right? But they may label themselves as something different. So this is based on Wikipedia. You may not feel like Wikipedia is 100% accurate. However, you can go look this up on your own if you feel like this information is not 100% accurate. iHeartMedia is the largest radio station group on the whole side of the whole United States. I think at one time they used to be Clear Channel. I think they transitioned into iHeart. They got 855 stations. They got 110 million listeners every week, right? 245 million every month, right? They recorded 3.5 billion in revenues in 2005, and that's old numbers. We're talking about almost a decade ago, right? So we understand this is a massive radio station. They got almost 1,000 stations, right? So I want you to know who these people are because I want you to remember this name. Now, iHeartRadio is a publicly owned company. I'm sorry, iHeartMedia is a publicly owned company. This is the parent company, right? They're publicly owned. Their share price closed today at $22.47. Looking at their financials, they got a float of around 123. They got a lot of institutional buy-in at 88%, right? They're not really being shorted that heavily. They have decent size amount of debt, not a lot of cash inside a particular bank. Cash flows are not that bad. Profit margin is not great. Operating margin is not great. Return on equity is not great. Return on assets is not great. Okay. That's the deal with iHeartMedia. So I want you to understand iHeartMedia is a publicly owned company. This is not a privately owned company. This company is publicly owned, right? They have shares available. And they don't, to me, have a big float, but we know float size is relative, but they do have a lot of institutional buy-in. And we're going to go back to this later. So this is what I call the parent company. This is iHeartMedia. We talked about their capacity, their size. Here's some of the purchases that they purchased. So they're doing a lot of acquisitions, which may be the reason why they're in so much debt. Here's the executive management. Here's the chairman and CEO, Pittman, right? Here's the chief operating officer, financial officer, going all the way down, right? Here's everybody. And you can go to their investors page because we talked about before, this is a publicly owned company. So we got the names of everybody, right? We know who they are. We know that where they fit in the particular structure. What's their official capacity? We got this brother, Tony Coles, president of the Black Information Network. I looked that up. This is the Black Information Network is the network that is over a Roland show. So here's this right here. Let me show you. Here's the Black Information Network team. Okay, so they're over Roland show. Also over Ed Gordon show. He used to do a show on BET back in the day, right? But they're over Roland show. So he got his streaming show on this particular network. Okay, so this is the parent company over his particular show. Okay, so that's the deal with that. So this is iHeartMedia. Now, what iHeartMedia has done was create a subsidiary called iHeartRadio, right? So you got the overall parent company, and now you got the radio company, right? So that's the deal with iHeartRadio. Now, through that subsidiary, right, what they did was they partnered with CTG to go into podcasting. But now we talked about before on another show, podcasting is a secular change in media entertainment, right? It's not a cyclical change, it's a secular. So we believe that the whole market is going to move to consuming this type of content. So then what we do is we do the same thing that we do on radio. We aggregate content by market segments. So we got to have a black market segment. We're probably going to have a gospel market segment. We're probably going to have a country market segment. We may have a health market segment. We have a finance market segment. But we're going to do the same thing that we do on radio. We're going to do the same thing that we do in tech and TV. We're going to create segments. We're going to create a sports podcasting segment. You know what I'm saying? We're going to keep segmenting the audience based kind of by niche and kind of by genre. So what they did was they partnered with CTG to form something called the Black Effect Podcast Network, right? So this is a particular press release that they put out, right? So now you start to understand one of the reasons why he has the people on his radio show, right, that he has is because he's the gatekeeper for this particular podcast, okay? And make sure this is the right article. So that's the one article. Let me go into this article because I feel like this is a little bit more in depth, right? So they named him the Senior Creative Officer of Cultural Content and Programming, right? So he doesn't have like a minor position in this, right? It's a good headshot they took on him just as a side thing. Good headshot, good photographer, okay? So he's part of a syndicated show, which is The Breakfast Club, gets 4.5 million listeners every week. Now, I want you to explain something. The Breakfast Club is owned by a syndication company called Premiere. Now, Premiere is the same syndication company that also syndicated Rush Limbaugh's show. And if you remember, right after the George Floyd situation, they had Rush Limbaugh call into the Breakfast Club to kind of talk about that scenario. Well, why did they do that? Because Rush Limbaugh's show is being syndicated by the same the Breakfast Club, and Rush Limbaugh's show is being syndicated by the same company. They're part of the same structure. So that's why Rush Limbaugh would call the show, because they kind of operate in opposite worlds, but they're under the same syndication structure, right? Which is Premier Networks, right? So you see this particular press release in which iHeartMedia, right, has renewed and extended its relationship with this particular guy, right? And then what they did was they gave him this particular position for this podcast network, right? So this is another press release put out by Business Wire, right? So as co-founder and chief creative officer of the Black Effect Podcast Network, and now senior creative officer of cultural content and programming at iHeart. So he don't just have a position with the podcast network. He now has a position with the particular parent company, right? So he has a 5-year deal, at least what's stated in here, that he's going to curate a new era of voices, programming, and events. Okay, so I want you to understand that this is in a press release put out by Business Wire, right? And this is a joint venture between Charlemagne and iHeartMedia, right? So this is the particular thing. So now ask yourself this. How come you have influencers in the space who talk the blackety black stuff, right? But then when the situation comes out, it's certain subjects dealing with CTG that they don't want to touch. Why? Because he's a gatekeeper. And if I'm a content creator on the internet and I want to get on this particular platform in which he's the gatekeeper on, he's pretty much the lead gatekeeper. There's another sister that works with him. And we're not going to really talk about her in this particular capacity. She's kind of like, I wouldn't say his partner, but she's also kind of structured horizontal to him in this. I don't want to criticize him publicly because then it can impair or affect my ability to get a podcast on this particular network. And I'm looking to grow my brand, get my message out to more people, and to get embedded into the structure. So even though I talk to blackety black, and I got a bunch of audience that believes that that's what I'm doing, I can't criticize this man for things that I would criticize somebody else for. So I will criticize an entertainer for being overweight, but I won't talk about the fact that this guy had to plead the delinquency of a minor, right? Because he was 22 and the chick was 15 and there was something going on there. I can never talk about that. So I got to talk about everything else except that I can never touch that because I got to keep my relationship with this guy because he's part of this structure and I'm not. I'm outside of the structure. So if I want to get into the structure, I can't say anything about it. So my principles are such to where if it's going to allow me to get into the gate, I got to step over a lot of things. I don't have a principle to where if I believe this man has done certain things, it don't matter if it's $500 million on the opposite side of that gate. I just don't go over that gate because I got to go through him to get there. So that's what's going on. So that's why you've seen certain people on social media kind of walk over stuff in dealing with this particular dude, right? But the reason why he jumped out to try to protect Barnes and Jackson is because one, like I said, a businessman's going to always protect his investment. Two, they're part of his structure. And this is what I'm talking about. So here's their particular podcast. So here's the Black Effect podcast, right? So let me see, can we find the show? So here we're going to go to all shows. And I want you to see that they got the Gangster Chronicles, which I know about because they on YouTube. But here's their show. So the reason why the dude came out and tried to come at Kwame Brown because he don't want these two guys to get destroyed. Because when Kwame Brown started talking about the fact that Steven Jackson was a trick and he was a fake gang member and yada, 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 we don't want these guys to get destroyed, right, in the public by Kwame. So what I got to do is I have to try to assist and attack this guy too, right? But I didn't really understand. I kind of probably didn't think my way all the way through it. And then with Barnes, you know, that's whatever. You know, Matt Barnes, you know, that's whatever. So Kwame Brown has so much ammunition against these dudes, it could destroy their image and their credibility in the eyes of the public. And we've invested in this particular show. And so then therefore, it's very important that this show becomes successful because not only does it make them look bad, it makes Charlemagne look bad because if he got to cut bait for this show, then he got to try to figure out how to replace this content creator. So you got to understand these people have corporate responsibilities, right? And that's why after a while, Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes started trying to clean this up. Why? Because they got corporate responsibilities, right? They're part of a corporate structure. Now, this is what I want you to understand because we pretty much laid everything out. And if you don't really follow what I can say, just watch the video 2 or 3 times. Kwame Brown talked about a song that plays on the radio, and he says, like, people get mad at me for cursing, they get mad at me for using the N-word, but there's a song that plays on the radio where the man's talking about a girl performing fellatio on him. And to me, it's like it's a trick anthem, but that's, because I come from what I come from. To me, it's a trick anthem. But he was talking about how the fact that they play this song on like just regular radio, and nobody has a problem with that. But at the same time, y'all mad because I use the N-word and I curse on YouTube. And he's 100% correct. But the issue is that iHeartMedia is one of the stations that's playing this song. Now, the question is, how do you combat that? Here's how you combat it. You just buy their stock. And you don't buy their stock because it's going to give you a great return. So, let's look at their 2-year chart. It's not terrible. It's not great. Here's their 5-year. Let's look at their max chart, right? It's not great, right? But you don't buy the stock because of a great return. You buy the stock because they are a content provider of media all over the country. They're now moving into the podcasting space. They're going to continue to provide content. So what they're going to do is start shaping the conversation for black people, right? This is what they're going to do. And so what they do is they hire black people that they think can contribute to that because they want black segmented comment, because it's been shown to be profitable. If you want to influence the content that they're going to now start broadcasting, not only to us, but about us, because people are going to tune into this content, and this is going to shape their perception of black people. This is what black people are about. So, the horrible decisions with a HORE, right? The recession with Jeezy, big up to Jeezy. Gangster Chronicles, big up to 8. Dropping Gems, checking in with Michelle Williams and All the Smoke. Now, just because I maybe have an affinity for some of these entertainers, it don't mean you need to, and it also don't mean that they're appropriate for your children, right? So you can't go by what I go by. You need to go by what you go by. But if you feel like this stuff is inappropriate and you're upset that they keep feeding this content not only to black people, but also to white people who now have an impression of black people because of the content that's fed to them, one of the ways you do this is you buy their stock. A lot of us don't understand the concept of an activist investor, where it means that you own a certain percentage of the stock to where now you start dictating to the board how things are going to go. If you look at the GME situation, one of the reasons why a lot of people are bullish on GME is because if that guy Ryan, I forgot his last name, he bought a massive amount of GME stock. And then what he did was he started essentially, first he suggested changes, and then essentially now he kind of low key almost took over the company. Now, he didn't really take it over, but he owns so much stock of GME that he has a major amount of influence over that company now. And then what he's done now is he's brought in a lot of people with specialties in fulfillment, also online e-commerce, to kind of change the direction of GME. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So if we don't like the content that this particular parent company is producing, right? If we don't like that content, instead of us going on Twitter, going back and forth with people, instead of us going on these particular, this guy is structured in this particular, where is he at right quick? He's structured in this corporate structure. So he's part of a subsidiary of this original parent corporate structure. Instead of us going back and forth with this guy online, right? Or going back and forth with, Matt Barnes online and, Steven Jackson online on Instagram, instead of us doing that, because they're really low level in the structure, right? Even Charlemagne, no disrespect, but he's low level in the structure. Instead of us going back and forth with them, the way to get to them is to buy ownership in the company and to continue to amass ownership in the company, And if you do this as a group, right, then one day you can walk in there and dictate, well, we don't like the kind of content that y'all playing. We don't like what y'all feeding our children from a music standpoint. Why would you play a song where a person's describing a girl giving him fellatio throughout the whole song and be playing this at 2:00 in the afternoon? Why would you do that? So you can't do that, though, until you get ownership, because once you get equity ownership, now you can start to dictate. And so these are the kind of conversations that we're not having. So once the hype is over behind this story, they're going to go right back to what they're doing. Right? They're going to go right back to what they're doing. Now, because I don't never desire to be on this network, I can tell you what I'm telling you. I don't have any desire to be on this podcast network. I don't ever have a desire to have a relationship with this guy. Never, don't have a desire to ever have a relationship. Don't have a desire to ever be on the Breakfast Club. It's not something I ever want to do. So because I don't have those desires, I can tell you this. Other people that have those desires can't say what I'm saying. Right? They can't, because they worry that if I come out against this dude, regardless of what he's done, as long as he's a valuable person in a particular corporate position, and I may be able to get access to that position via him, I can't ever come out and say it because I don't want to destroy the relationship. Right. And that's how they choosing to play this game. I'm not mad at them. That's what they choose to do. But like I said, these are some of the same people that get on this YouTube and get on this social media and talk to black stuff. So you got to understand, it's really entertainment at the end of the day, because with these guys, it's entertainment. Him being a gangster is entertainment. Like it's entertainment. You know, it's interesting to me that you make millions of dollars playing basketball, but you're trying to convince us you a gang member. So you're telling me you part of a criminal organization, and you play basketball. I'm not saying that can't be true. It's been true in certain situations. You got guys in the NFL, especially in the NFL, that got caught up as part of criminal organizations. But the way he was trying to press it on us, to me, was always very interesting. And then, you know, Matt Barnes is the tough guy, and that's just been his role. And we supposed to believe that. But Kwame Brown didn't believe it. Because he knows the dude on some level. So, these are the kind of people that we are supposed to be impressed with enough to listen to what they have to say. And I'm not saying they don't have anything that they have to say that's relevant, but I just have no desire to be connected to these type of people. Now, they may be valuable to somebody else. Everybody likes different type of content. But I'm not finna go on the show with the fake tough guy and the fake gang member, because there's nothing that I need to get to the public so bad to where I got to make those kind of concessions. Right. I keep doing my Facebook and YouTube, and my message to hit the people it's supposed to hit. But if you believe that, well, I have to make these concessions and walk over certain things to get my message out to certain people, well, you got to do what you got to do. You got to make a decision. So I really want you to understand is that the way you build power and influence in this world a lot of times takes time. It takes you building what I call a storehouse of provisions that you can use when you need to. It's like, I may not need wheat at a particular time, but what I'm doing all year is I'm storing wheat. So when I need the wheat, I know I could go to it. We a lot of times deal with issues from an acute standpoint. Something happens, we react to them. And that's how we've been programmed. We've been programmed with something happens, we react. Something happens, we react. Something happens, we react. If you can start thinking more long term and start thinking from a power dynamic, how can I put me and my group in a position of power? What do I need to do? And a lot of times it's this type of stuff. It's information gathering. It's not doxing people. It's information gathering. You're dealing with people that work in a professional corporate space. Who are they beholden to? OK, now, who is that person beholden to? Because, see, if you can get to these people, right, you can get to these people. You can get them. You can get these guys out of here. Right. If you can get to these people and get their attention. Right. You can get this guy right out of here. That's what you can do. You ain't got to go. You don't have to start at the bottom. You can start at the top. And one of the ways in which you can start at that particular top is you can start getting ownership in a particular company. Right. So this is how you expose the gatekeepers. And this is how you eliminate the gatekeepers. And like I said before, as I'm talking about from a professional standpoint. And want to repeat, maybe you want to go through this particular content maybe 2 or 3 times to really understand it. It's not based for you to get a knee-jerk reaction to it. It's really not about that. I'm trying to get you to understand from a more structured and organized way of going about things that's not as reactionary, right? Because I'm not just trying to get your attention by piggybacking off the content while it's hot, and the next week I'm talking about something else. One thing you'll notice if you watch my page, I'm fairly consistent in the type of content I produce, because I'm trying to get you to see the world from a different level and then to operate differently, right? So we got to kind of essentially just run the same play over and over again until you can't get it wrong, right? So I hope that this was valuable to you. Share it out. This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, and I'll talk to you later.